So I just graduated from a program where, great books program. So we read the great books of the Western canon. And the kind of general definition they left us with is a book that asks deep philosophical questions and meaningfully contributes to our understanding, or at least our consideration of those questions. So obviously, that's a very broad category. It's very subjective. This is going to be a subjective video, and I'm going to reach my conclusion. I'm going to have my opinion. And if you disagree with me, that's great. I would love to hear your disagreements. Leave a comment. So I'm guessing most of you are already pretty, familiar with the gist of the Lord of the Flies plot. A bunch of children are deserted an island. They fail to govern themselves. Imagine that. But just in case you aren't, I'm gonna go through a little bit, in a tiny bit more detail. Spoiler alert, in case you don't want to hear the ending. So, bunch of boys deserted an island. There are three that actually managed to have a personality. There's Piggy, who's smart but fat and asthmatic. There's Ralph, who starts out as a normal boy but is kind of chosen to be the leader through circumstances not really in his control, but he kind of grows as a character under the weight of leadership. He accepts his role, he creates some parliamentary procedures, he makes all the decisions, and he comes to respect Piggy more. Obviously, the other boys, they make fun of Piggy a lot, they eventually come to harm Piggy, but Ralph really learns to respect, the advice of Piggy, who is is at least treated as the smartest character. And finally, we have Jack, who has a very strong desire to lead, but not the best of intentions. So as Ralph, becomes a better leader, he comes to value the advice of Piggy more. He becomes very concerned with keeping a constant fire because this is the only hope of getting off the island, is sending a smoke signal so that one of the ships going by will see them and rescue them. However, Jack, who wants to be the leader, uh, doesn't really seem to see the value in that. He forms this kind of hunting group, and they abandon the fire. They let the fire go out, and there's some paranoia growing on the island about a supposed beast. Jack uses this to his advantage through demagoguery. He basically convinces all a significant chunk to abandon Ralph and the fire, basically their hope of escape, for the promise of hunting more pigs and hunting down the beast. The tensions between Ralph and Jack grow mostly because of Jack, and Jack kills Piggy and forces the other members of Ralph's group to join Jack's group, and starts hunting Ralph throughout the island and sets the island on fire trying to kill Ralph. He's completely idiotic, of course. It's where they live, it's where they get all of their food. It would kill them as well as Ralph, so I really have no comprehension of how even an 11-year-old would come to this conclusion, think it was a good idea. Um, Somewhat ironically, the fire is a thing that saves Ralph because it does create the smoke signal, and a Navy ship comes and saves them at the end. So I do think there are some good parts of this book. There's some really interesting themes about good and evil. About I thought the use of names was really interesting. So there's a character I've been referring to as Piggy. That's not his real name, but we aren't given his real name. He specifically asks not to be called Piggy, which is what leads the boys to start calling him that. So it's part of the power struggle is what you get to be named. And Jack, who really is very autocratic as a leader, forces the boys to call him the chief. And I thought that was so interesting, the use of names. Another interesting point of this is in the narration. I don't even think it's in the dialogue, just in the narration. They start referring to Jack's splinter group as savages as they lose hope of the fire and returning home, and they start painting their faces and tying their hair back and become obsessed with hunting. And it's just a really kind of interesting use of name there in terms of the us versus them categorization that takes place throughout the book. However, I think there are a lot of bad points. So there are a lot of undeveloped characters. For instance, Roger suggests that they vote on the leader. That's how Ralph ends up being the first leader and not Jack. But Roger never really keeps up that kind of democratic spirit you might expect from someone like that. That you never suggest voting on anything else. You never suggest voting on a new leader. You never suggest democracy in any way. And I'm really surprised because I would imagine if you had a group of boys stranded in an island, they wouldn't just elect a leader and then do whatever he says. They'd probably want to vote on everything. They probably would come up with a system of kind of direct democracy. And there are instances where children have been deserted on islands and they don't kill each other. It doesn't get that bad. I'm sure it's not great. I'm sure there are issues in bullying and all of that. But they don't kill each other. I really do think it could have been a more interesting book. I think a lot of parts were cut out of it, especially with Simon. I think Simon could have been a really interesting character, but all of his personality was cut away. So he's just kind of this character who cares about other people and he acts in their interest, and he seems aware that the beast, the paranoia they're talking about, is real, but it's within them, and it's not an external evil. So I am just kind of left with this question of like, okay, so like, why is this book important? Like the author won a Nobel Prize in literature. I'm sure plenty of you were forced to read this at some point in school. I don't know that many people who think, oh, this is like one of my favorite books, but I'm guessing they have to be out there. So really, why is this considered a good book, perhaps even a great book by many people? Ultimately, I think that while William Golding tries to write this book about the entirety of human experience, I don't think it can be interpreted that way. William Golding was a member of the Royal Navy during World War II, uh, in part responsible for shooting down a German ship, and he was on the beaches of Normandy during D-Day. He saw terrible, terrible things. And I think this book, to me, it seems like his attempt at expressing the atrocities he saw in war. And I think he misattributed the atrocities we saw at war is innate within human nature, as the kind of default. And I think he places society as this thing holding us back from committing those atrocities. But I think if that were the case, society would never have formed. I think peaceful society really kind of has to be the default, or else we would have died out.